Today's video is all about eggplant. How to start them from seed all the way up to where they're this size and ready to harvest fruit. Welcome back to my subscribers. If you're new to the channel, my name is Riley and today we're in my garden. And today we're going to talk about eggplant, how we start them from seed, how we pot them up into 3-inch square nursery pots, how we prepare them to go outside into their final home in the garden, how we transplant them into their final home in the garden, how we care for them for the life of the plant, and finally, how we harvest them when those fruit get to about this size. When we start eggplant seeds, the process is exactly the same as when we start tomato seeds. And I've already done a video on how to start tomato seeds indoors. And I'll leave a link down below in the video description of how to do that. And if you're interested in how to start your eggplant from seed, just follow those instructions exactly. Now, eggplants are slow growers, so it's going to take 1 to 2 weeks before they're going to germinate, and then another 2 to 3 weeks before they're ready to be moved up from a 6-cell seed tray like this up into a 3-inch square nursery pot like this. But again, the process for transplanting those eggplants are very similar to how we transplant the tomato plants, with one very important exception. On the tomato plant, we bury as much of the stem as we can when we transplant them, because the tomato plant is going to grow roots out of all around that buried stem. And the eggplant's not going to do that. The eggplant is basically only going to grow roots out of a node, and a node is where a branch meets the main stem of the plant. So when we transplant eggplant, we want to transplant at maximum up to this first set of leaves called the cotyledons, and no higher than that. Other than that, the process for transplanting your eggplants from 6-cell seed trays into these 3-inch square nursery pots, exactly the same as tomato plants. Now, I let these eggplants grow for 8 to 10 weeks inside, and when I'm ready to move them outside, just like my tomato plants, I don't harden off my eggplants. I've dialed in my indoor grow light system to where I'm giving my eggplants and my tomato plants enough light intensity so that when I move them outside, I don't have to acclimate them to the intensity of the sun. And if you're interested in how I'm able to do that, I'll put another link down in the video description of a video I've already done on that topic. Now, I let my eggplants grow 8 to 10 weeks and get big and healthy like this before I transplant them to their final home in my garden. And I do that mainly to protect against pest damage. Now, in the part of the country where I live, I have pressure from Japanese flea beetle. And if I were to transplant a young 4 or 5 week old eggplant seedling into my garden and those Japanese flea beetles got at it, they could quickly do enough damage to that small plant to kill it. But a big healthy plant like this going into my garden, they can withstand a little bit of Japanese flea beetle pressure if it's there, a little bit of nibbling on these leaves, a little bit of holes. They're able to heal themselves and withstand that damage without dying. And we're going to talk about how we can prevent damage from the Japanese flea beetle and how I control them in my garden. But the first step in controlling them is to make sure that I do not transplant out an eggplant that is less than 8 to 10 weeks old. Now, when I'm gardening, I don't add any store-bought chemicals or fertilizers to my garden beds. I amend my beds every year before transplanting with compost that I make here in my backyard. And that's what I'm going to do right now. But if you don't have access to good quality compost, what I can recommend to you is a product that I have used in the past to supplement my own compost, and I find that works very, very well. And that is Black Cow composted cow manure. Now, I want you to be careful. I can speak for this brand, but I can't speak for any other brands of composted cow manure. But here's what I could tell you. This composted cow manure should be a dark brown in color. There should be no smell of manure. It should be fully composted. If you go to a big box store, you're going to see a lot of bulk items on sale, what they're calling composted cow manure, and I want you to be very, very careful. Ask an associate to open up one of those bags and show you that material. If you find that that material is not dark brown or black and you can smell cow manure in it at all, don't buy it. It's not fully composted and it's going to end up burning up your plants. So let's get this bed amended. Just fill in here. Got anything that got into my bin, and about an inch of my homemade compost is going on top of this bed. Now, I do not sift my compost before it goes into my garden beds. I do sift it before I use it for seed starting, but when it goes into my garden beds, I don't bother to sift it because I like to have some of those bigger chunks in there. It allows for some good airflow into the root systems of the plants and healthier growth. And when we're transplanting these eggplants, eggplant spacing, 12 to 18 inches is what we want. And all I do is I dig a hole about the size of this container. Just put a little bit of water in this hole. I ease the eggplant out of the container like that. You can see this eggplant, very healthy. It's not root bound. Those roots are not winding all the way around this eggplant. Drop it in this hole. And I plant it basically right up to the top of the level that it was in this container. Water it in one more time manually. And there it is. Now, while I'm doing that, let's talk about watering. You always want to make sure that all of your vegetable plants have even watering. And you can see this connection here. This is for my soaker hose system. And I've already done a video on how to install a soaker hose system, so I'll leave a link for that down in the description. But if it's within your means, I highly recommend one. The technology now with soaker hose systems is just fantastic, and it makes your life a heck of a lot easier. So let me get this soaker hose system set up. We'll come back, we'll talk about protecting our soil, and we're going to talk about how we do more insect prevention. We have the rest of the eggplant in the bed, spacing 12 to 18 inches apart, and I've got my soaker hose system in on top of my compost. It's not buried under my compost. The next thing we need to do, and is very, very important, is protect that soil by putting mulch over it. Now, you have a lot of options available to you for mulch, and normally people will use what is locally easily available in their area. For me, I use hardwood mulch. I find that it works just fantastically. In fact, when you put it over the beds, about 1 to 2 inches of mulch on top of our compost, in a few days the top of that is going to dry out, become a little brown, but you can lift that up, and underneath where it's contacting the soil is still a lot of moisture there, and that is just perfect. It works great for keeping moisture in the beds. Now I'm going to fill this bed up with about 1 to 2 inches of this hardwood mulch on top of my compost, and I'm going to leave about 2 or 3 inches around the stem of each plant. And when we're done with that, we're going to talk about insect control. Let's talk about other preventative measures we can take for Japanese flea beetle damage on eggplants. And one thing that we can do is purchase food safe Diatomaceous Earth. This is perfectly safe for pets and humans, but to insects, when they crawl across it, it's like they're crawling across a field of glass, and it kills them. Now, it is not discriminatory, so it is going to kill any insects that crawl across the top. But if you have pressure from Japanese flea beetle, if you have pressure from cucumber beetles, this is a good product to try as a preventative measure to keep them off of your plants. One point of note, if it rains, you're going to have to apply it again. And the way that we're going to apply it is we're just going to sprinkle some of this around the base of the plant, just like that. When your eggplants mature and as they get bigger, and especially or when they start to set fruit, those fruit are going to be very heavy for the plant. We're going to need to support the eggplant, and you can do this in a couple of ways. You could purchase one of those thin wire tomato cages, and you could put that around your eggplant. I don't use them, but I'm sure they would work. I use these 4-foot plastic garden spikes, and I'll put them beside the eggplant, and I'll normally put 2 per eggplant, and I let those eggplants fork into 2 main branches, and then I'll use some garden Velcro like this, and as that plant's growing up, I'll wrap that plant stem around with the garden Velcro and attach it to these 4-foot garden stakes. If we don't support them, they could fall over from the weight of the fruit and they could break. And that leads me to our last topic, and that is harvesting your eggplant. So when they do get to this size and you're ready to harvest them, you're going to have to use scissors or garden shears or snippers to cut them off at the stem right there. You don't want to tug on these, it will break the branch, and you can try to twist them off, but to be honest, it's a lot faster to keep some garden clippers with you, go in and just snip them off. I hope you enjoyed the video. I wish you all the luck in the world for your eggplant this season. My name is Riley. Thank you for watching the video. If you're a subscriber, thank you for already subscribing. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. We love to have you on the channel. And don't forget to ring that bell so you'll be notified next week when we put out our next video.